just so everybody knows what a Columbian necktie is, if you don't know, they'll they'll cut your throat and reach up with their hand through your throat and pull your tongue down through your neck. And it looks like a little necktie through your throat. That's the Columbian necktie.
Ooh-wee. Well, I always thought it when they put that bag over your head and tighten it and pull you down and just suffocate you to death. That's what I thought it was. But
No.
damn, oh. The GlaDEAtor. Good evening, good evening. This is the GlaDEAtor. I got a real good one today, real good one. I got a special guest here, former partner, former friend, former co-worker I used to work with while in Memphis. I got Joey Monday. Joey Monday. And Joey's famous saying was, "You killing me. You killing me, Abe. You killing me." So you kill me, Joey. You kill me with it, man. So come on and let's tell us about yourself.
Well, I worked for DEA. I hired in 1987. I was at Tennessee Bureau of Investigation before that. Been all around the world. My first station was in Houston, Texas for about 5 years. And I volunteered to go to South America, went to Bolivia, La Paz, where we did basically coca labs in the jungles of South America and blew up runways and did that type of thing over there for a couple of years. And
so Joey, was that snowcap?
well, I wasn't a snowcap guy. I was assigned to operations planning group in the embassy. That consisted of CIA, the Army, the Navy, the Navy SEALs, Coast Guard, DEA, FBI, and we supported in-country operations, but part of that was snowcap. Snowcap teams would come down there to, to Bolivia, to Peru, to Colombia, and work. And I was basically the embassy's representative to them and went to the outer bases and lived with them in the jungles helping with their operations. So I was really never assigned to snowcap. I was assigned to in-country personnel.
Yeah, that's right. But and snowcap was in that country though. And snowcap was. Tell me about it, because I want people to understand what snowcap was. But
well, the first operation going way back was called Blast Furnace, and it was kind of a bunch of guys, former military guys that were DEA agent. Frank White actually started it. Frank ended up retiring out of Chicago. But basically, Congress allotted a certain amount of money, and we got training in snowcap training at Fort Benning, Georgia, at Ranger School. It was a modified Ranger School. You had language training, and then you would get assigned to a snowcap team, which would basically have a supervisor and 10 to 12 people. And look, I think it did some good. We destroyed a lot of labs, seized a lot of dope that kept it from coming into the country, but I had mixed feelings about it. I believed in the program. I believed it was a success if you only look at that. In my opinion, the death of snowcap happened when the plane crashed in Peru. I was actually in country, and I had friends that died on that plane crash. And
Jay was one of my classmates. Jay, small, short guy, Jay Seal.
Yeah,
Jay Seal was a classmate of mine.
He was one of the pilots with Frankie Wallace, who worked in Houston with me. Frank Fernandez, I worked in snowcap with. Meredith, she was actually in my snowcap class. I had seen Meredith about 2 weeks prior to that at the Miami airport. She was back for a trial, and I was coming back from my third son being born, going back to Bolivia, and she was going back to Lima. And that was the last time I saw Meredith. And you know, I was never more proud of my agency when it turned into a recovery and they actually found the missing agents. But I believe at that point, that was the actual straw that broke the camel's back. It became the cost was too much. It was too much for the agency. And And I agreed with that decision. I really did.
Okay. All right. So snowcap was definitely a good thing. Was actually on the ground helping eradicate all the cocaine labs in Bolivia and Colombia, I believe. And those where cocaine is actually produced and grown. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, we did the base labs were in Peru and Bolivia, and that's where it's grown, obviously. And it was turned into a cocaine base. The actual leaves were, and usually it was transported out to Colombia to be made into HCl, which would come to the States. That's what you would see as the HCl isomer would come back as cocaine you'd see on the streets in Memphis or anywhere else in the country for that matter.
Right. So you left La Paz, and where did you go from there?
Well, I wanted to, being a Tennessee boy, I wanted to get back to Tennessee. And if you remember, there was an agent, Calvin, I can't remember the guy's name. He had a heart attack and passed away. And that left an opening. Yeah, and left an opening in Memphis. So Vince Morgano got me back to Memphis. And that's where this case started. I've been in Memphis about 2 weeks before Harry got there, and Harry and I had never even met before. I mean, we had worked a couple of cases together, out of Houston, him and being in Fort Lauderdale, Miami. We did 2 cases together. Never met him personally, didn't know him. It's just by reputation. Like you had a reputation in Memphis. I knew you long before I met you.
Is that right?
Absolutely, I'd heard about you. So
well, I appreciate that, man. But you talking about Harry Summers, right?
Yes.
Harry Summers.
Yes, who ultimately became our boss, our big boss down the road. And the case that we're talking about or getting ready to talk about, look, that honestly, Harry, I tell you, that made his career. That was a career case. And it made Paul O'Brien, who was, if you remember, Paul O'Brien was a young prosecutor, hadn't been
aggressive
assistant U.S. attorney, but a couple of years, or not even a year. And he caught that case. And he ended up being the third man in DOJ out of D.C. eventually.
Right. Yeah, Paul was aggressive New Yorker, wasn't he?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's an aggressive guy, man. He really was. He had a lot of. I mean, Billy Renton was aggressive too, and so.
And and Harry and I've talked to this a lot. At that time in Memphis, Memphis was it's a southern town, and the police and sheriffs, they're one way, and DEA was one way, but there was that fight that there was a disagreement where DEA's management and FBI's management were transferred out because they couldn't get along, and that's when Billy Renton came in.
And I remember that. I remember that vividly because I was the one that was supposed to go initially to the FBI, and they was going to send Baldwin over there. I think his name Dave. They sent him.
Yeah.
But you came along, and you eventually went over there and started working with the FBI, as we call them. But I remember that vividly. Tom Piketty was the manager in Memphis, the rack in Memphis, who actually got sent to Houston. So man, we talking about a lot of things, man, the general public don't even know about, because DEA does a good job, in what they do. It had actually came down to the fact that Tom didn't feel like we was getting the short end of whoever we sent. Whoever he sent from Memphis was going to be better than whoever the FBI sent over the DEA. That's what I remember.
Yeah. Well, and Harry and I have talked about it, and it was like after that happened, which I had no part in any of that. I'm being transferred in from Bolivia. Harry's being transferred in from Caracas. Billy Renton came from where was
headquarters?
St. Louis, I guess.
No, he came from headquarters.
Well, he came as the boss, so it was like the perfect storm. The three of us got there within a month of each other. And, I had done wires. Harry had done wires. I don't know that Memphis had actually done many wires. And when I say wires, I'm talking about a Title III wiretap on phones is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so it was like the perfect storm. And man, for those that, and I'm not talking about me, it wasn't me that did it. I can promise you that. I was glad to play a small role in it. But it was just like the mixture of people, you know, local knowledge, and you, Dave McGriff, the guys who lived in Memphis forever and knew the players. I had no idea who those people were. But what I brought to the table was, you know, overseas experience and dealing with Columbians and the money laundering aspects of it. After working in Houston, that's all we work with Columbians.
Well, you spoke Spanish. You brought some hard work. You brought some determination, and you actually brought some diplomatic ability, man, that we just didn't have. Because once you got seated there, you kind of go back and forth to the FBI, like a liaison between us and DEA, and you brought something that we didn't have, because we really wasn't just working with the FBI before Billy and you and Harry got there. We really wasn't.
And it was so good, and I'm proud of this. The FBI put in a state-of-the-art wire room. It had never been used. DEA, on this case we're talking about, we were the first ones to use the FBI's wire room before them. They had never done a wire out of that wire room until we had actually done one.
Right, because DEA is aggressive. I mean, DEA agents by nature and culture are more aggressive when it comes to law enforcement and drug trafficking and firearms and all of that, man. It's just the nature. It's two different. I think it's two different type of cultures, quite frankly. What you think about that?
Oh, it absolutely was. You know, we always were known as the cowboys and loose cannons, and we always called them the cookie cutters, or they were the bureaucrats. You know, it took 3 or 4 of them to make a decision we'd make on the street in about 3 seconds.
Right, because we were kind of trained to do it, to be initiative. But anyway, you got to Memphis, and you, Harry, I got there. I remember seeing you the first time I got you. I remember seeing you in the office, didn't know who you was, and somebody said, that's the guy from Bolivia. And a couple of weeks later, I saw Harry coming out of the back, and they said, that's the guy from, someone said, that's that guy from Caracas, Venezuela, who just got here. So, we got to know each other, man, and it was wonderful. It was beautiful. Boy, we all got along and all of that. But this informant that I was using this foreman that I was using was a very good informant. He kind of knew Memphis too. So kind of start from that. We'll kind of start from when we talking about this whole Columbian hit squad and necktie case. So tell me about from the beginning, from when you first got involved in that case.
Okay. So the first play that Harry and I had in, we were out working another case at a lab. We got a call out because you guys had been on surveillance at a hotel room where a Colombian national, who ended up being Abraham Hernandez, was making a ton of phone calls across the world, not just in the U.S., but he was actually calling Colombia. Back in the days, a lot of times, especially if you were using a burner phone, which Abraham was, and a burner phone basically was a phone that had been stolen and given to him to use, you couldn't call overseas. You couldn't call Colombia. So you had to use a hard line to call outside the country. That's that
year was like 94, something like that, 94.
Yeah.
Something like
that. So he had to use a hardline phone at the hotel to call outside to Colombia. But then he'd get back on the burner phone and talk to his people in Miami and New York. Anyway, y'all did the search warrant, went to Chellis Thomas's business, did the search warrant, found some dope, found some money, ended up arresting Abraham Hernandez, who had some money, quite a bit of money on him, I think at the time. He got locked up. Well, really, at that point, that was me and Harry's part in it. We just helped on surveillance, right?
Right.
And then later, we got word that Abraham was in contact with Columbians in Miami, New York, and actually in Cali, Colombia. And,
let me stop you right there. Tell us who Abraham is again, and tell us who Chalice Thomas is again.
Okay, Abraham was a Colombian national, and he was sent by the Colombians to do the business in Memphis. He was
describing.
He was supplying our area, Memphis. Like,
was he a light-skinned? Was he normally look like a Colombian? Was he dark-skinned?
No. And going back to the hotel, when we first got there, we were told, "Hey, man, this is the main guy. This is the main guy from Colombia. He's speaking Colombia. He's calling Colombia. He's the man." And Harry and I were together in the car, and the first time we saw him walk outside to go get something to eat, well, he was black. And Harry and I looked at each other and started laughing, like, and look, it's no knock on any of the agents or cops in Memphis at all. They just, that's not something they knew about because they hadn't spent time overseas. And we just kind of looked at each other and laughed, like, man, that guy ain't shit. I mean, he's black. Colombians consider them a lower form. They are racist. And so I knew then that guy, he was just a throwaway. Look, he was here to conduct business. He can move around in Memphis because he was black. I'm sure that was well thought out by them. He could speak broken English, but he had a girlfriend from Houston who was actually light-skinned Hispanic. She was Mexican, Margarita, and she spoke fluent English. She was raised in the U.S. I'll get into her part in all this a little bit later. But we went from there. He got arrested. We got word later when he was in jail that the Colombians were reaching out because there was like 800 kilos of cocaine missing.
And it came to Memphis. That it arrived in Memphis.
It disappeared.
800 kilos. That's a lot of kilos of cocaine, boy. What do you think that's worth about around that time?
Oh, back then, wholesale, you're talking, let's just say 22,000 a kilo, maybe 20. Wholesale in Houston. Now, you're talking about Memphis. I'm talking about that price. In Houston, it's 15. It's 15. If you're back in that time, if you were dealing directly with the Colombians on a wholesale, it was about 15. So you turn around and sell it in Memphis for 32. You know what I'm saying?
You're talking about $11 million worth of cocaine.
Yeah, and
it's a lot of money.
Somebody needed to pay, and we figured it out later why and what happened, how many people were actually killed over it. But we spoke with Margarita at length, and obviously, as you could imagine.
Hey, Joey, tell us what happened to Chalice Thomas, who was the person who when he did the search warrant on.
Well, and I think this is why Abraham, what you just said is why I think Abraham decided he only had one choice, and that was to cooperate with the government. Because the only witness that Abraham had that he gave the dope to the person who was supposed to get it. Now, I'm not talking about 800 kilos. That was over a period of time lost. I think it was about 300. This delivery was like 300 kilos. And the only witness of Abraham delivering that dope in the car to Robert Holmes was Chalice Thomas. Now, it was never proved that Robert Holmes killed Chalice Thomas, but he was the only witness on Abraham's behalf that knew who took that dope, other than Abraham. And Abraham was getting the blame for it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And so what happened to Chalice?
Well, he disappeared. They didn't find Chalice for a long time. We looked for him. If you remember, we looked for him hard. As soon as we heard that story from Abraham, we started looking for Chalice, and ain't nobody seen Chalice in weeks.
Yeah.
And so basically we thought, well, look, he knows that the heat's on. He's just going to hide. You know what I'm saying? He's just going to hide out. We'll find him eventually. Well, eventually we did find him. Well, we didn't. MPD found him. he was actually found in the trunk of a car in the summertime at the MPD impound lot. That had been murdered and stuck in the trunk of the car. There's a bunch of flies around the trunk, if you remember. And that's when they found Chellis.
And so now, what was the cause of death?
I think he was shot in the head.
Didn't he have that Columbian necktie?
I remember seeing those pictures, but I don't remember Columbian necktie now. I don't remember seeing that.
I remember it. I remember that. Yeah.
And just so everybody knows what a Columbian necktie is, if you don't know, they'll cut your throat and reach up with their hand through your throat and pull your tongue down through your neck. And it looks like a little necktie through your throat. That's the Columbian necktie.
Well, I always thought it when they put that bag over your head and tighten it and pull you down and just suffocate you to death. That's what I thought it was. But
no.
Damn,
That's the reason I was saying I don't remember that. And a Columbian, I don't believe killed Chellis.
Okay. Well,
If
clarified that
then. Was send the message, that's how you would do it.
Ooh-wee. That's a way to die, man, with your tongue just, that's awful. It's awful. Okay, keep going. I'm listening.
So we get a call from Margarita saying that Abraham wants to cooperate, okay? And as you know, it's hard to go into any prison if you're an agent and talk to an inmate because the walls have ears and eyes. Yeah. I mean, if you want to put somebody in jeopardy, you do that. So we figured out a way to get him out to talk to his attorney, supposedly, and he came and met us outside the prison. And we talked to him, broken English. I think Margarita was at that first meeting, and he basically told us a story. He's like, "Look, hey, this is what happened, and I need some help." But what the Columbians are wanting to do is they want to come to Memphis, send a bunch of guys to Memphis and kidnap the people who actually own the money, because the Columbians believe Abraham, right? That somebody stole it. Look, if Abraham would have had that dope, they had already kidnapped Abraham's brother in Columbia. All right, they had him kidnapped already and was threatening to kill him. So if Abraham,
they had one of his family members. Was the family member in Houston or was he in Columbia?
No, he was in Columbia. Kidnapped him and was holding him, threatened to kill him if Abraham didn't give him the dope back. So if Abraham would have the dope, the Columbians in Cali felt confident that he would have given it back based on them killing his brother, kidnapping and threatening to kill his brother, right?
Okay.
So he told them, "Look, this is who has the dope. This is who's got the kilos. I gave it to him. And if you don't believe me, find Chellis. Chellis is going to tell you the same story. He was there when I gave him the dope." Well, we already talked about what happened to Chellis. So now Abraham's out by himself now, but they still believe him. He said, "Look, I know some guys. Here's what the story was that I told him to give the Columbians through Margarita. You tell them that there's another guy in Memphis that knows the guys who stole the dope. He's from Memphis. He grew up in Memphis, and that's your snitch, Abe. That's who I'm talking about."
That's the informant that I was working. And I remember yourself, Harry, and Ren said, "Hey, you think we can use this informant, man? So he kind of know everything around here, and we're gonna kind of hook him up with these guys. And plus, he knew how Robert Holmes and Harvey Holmes and all those North Memphis guys, and he fit. It actually was the perfect situation."
It was, and did you catch him with 17 kilos of cocaine, 12 kilos? That was his third strike.
It was his third strike, but we never called him with kilos. We called him with selling crack. I had another informant actually buy crack from him, and he knew the deal. And in federal cases, once these guys go federal, their cases go federal, they're more likely to cooperate, than not, because they know the deal. He had never been in the federal system before we bought from him. That's what happened, and he realized, and he
No,
wasn't.
I can remember telling many people, "Congratulations, you just graduated high school. You going to college now."
Yeah.
And
And that means going to the federal system. Yes.
And so, when I call him a snitch, that's no disrespect. I mean, this is me and you talking. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the two things that your informant gave me, the two sayings that I used for another 20 years after this case, when we first met him, first time I ever met him, he says, "Hey, brother, call me a snitch, but call me at fucking home."
Call me at home, though.
Then he said, another one of the sayings he had, he goes, "Why do 10 when you can do a friend?"
Why do 10 when you can do a friend? Now, that's a smart guy. There's no point in spending your life in jail. You know what you done wrong. Why go hire a lawyer? Why go make bonds? Why go spend all your money that you done made? Just cooperate and do what you need to do. And smart guy.
So we met and came up with that story, and your informant was we're gonna bring the Columbian assassins to Memphis, obviously keep up with them, and bring them to Memphis and have them, they wouldn't meet with Abraham because they wasn't going to a federal prison to meet with Abraham, but they were going to be introduced to your informant through Abraham's girlfriend. That's once they got to Memphis. So we came up with that story. Now it took a while for that story, for them to bite off on that story, and ultimately what those guys were called in Spanish was the Angels of Death. And basically all those guys did was travel the country and do collections for the Cali cartel. That's basically what they did. So one of the problems we ran into is Margarita was again, she was raised in America. Her parents were Mexican, but they were normal people. You know what I'm saying? They came to the country under a green card work visa. They became citizens. Her dad was the first generation American citizen. She was the second. You know what I mean? He's just a hard-working guy like anybody else. He didn't have nothing to do with the dope business. And like any father, he's got a 19-year-old daughter that lives with him that's expecting his first grandson, which was Abraham's. And he didn't want her to cooperate, man. This is dangerous, you know?
Right.
And so basically Harry and I talked Billy Renton and said, "Look, man, this is the deal. If you want her to cooperate, we're going to have to go to Houston and get her daddy's permission because she won't do it. He's not going to let her, and it's going to be a roadblock for us." So Billy agreed, and I'll never forget sitting down in that man's living room, and we basically introduced ourselves, went through our history, and we didn't pull any punches. Told what, not that his daughter was involved in it, but what her boyfriend, the father of his grandchild, was going to be. And we basically told her, "Hey, we give you our word. We're going to take care of her. We'll protect her as best we can, like she's our own." And actually, I mean, we got his blessing, and he shook our hands, and we were off and running. And so she started making phone calls, acting as a conduit between Abraham in prison and the Columbians in New York, in Miami. She was not at that time. She eventually talked to the guys in Cali, but that was later on.
Cali, Columbia. That's what we're talking about. Yeah.
So basically, I'm talking about Abraham Hernandez, gave the story to the Cali people, the Miami people, and the New York people, that he had a guy, your informant in Memphis, that would be willing for a price to take them to the people that actually stole the cocaine and owed the money. And the plan was they were going to kidnap them, torture them. Either they were going to come up with the money or the dope, or they're going to die. That's your three choices once they get you.
Once they got a hold of them, yeah.
So the phone calls were made, and again, man, it went around. This took, it took months to do all this, to coordinate all this before the first meeting. Well, we heard on the recorded phone calls that Margarita was making is that the Columbians, the hit squad, were in New York doing other business. And when that business was finished in New York, they would come to Memphis and meet with her for her to make the introduction to your informant. Okay?
Yeah.
And so I remember the day it happened. It was in Bartlett, and Harry and I were sitting in my BMW in the parking lot. We had Margarita in a rental car. She was sitting in the parking lot behind the Wendy's there in Bartlett. And the phone calls are coming back and forth. Sure enough, here comes a car pulling up. I think it had New Jersey tags on. 2 people got out of the car. There was a total of 4. But 2 people got out of the car, and they were white Columbians. They were Caucasian Columbians. And Harry and I high-fived and said, okay, now they actually sent somebody now that they believe it's going to hurt them if we catch these guys.
Yeah.
These guys, it's the real deal. It became real at that point. And they left 2 people.
Describe them for us. You said they was white, but were they well dressed? Did they just look like?
No, just look like normal people, just like you would anybody walking around Memphis. I mean, they had dark hair, obviously. None of them spoke. Well, one of them did. I found out later at the interview, but most of them did not speak English. But they gave, when they met Margarita, a typical South American intro when you're meeting someone is they hug. I mean, they're a very hands-on people. You know what I mean? Friendship-wise. They show trust by usually kissing you, on each side of your cheek and hugging you. And that was the greeting that was given to Margarita. So we knew that they had bought the store. You know what I'm saying? Right. We knew that they trusted her at that point. But they still didn't want to meet your informant, right? They wanted to talk to Abraham, and they talked to Abraham. She got Abraham on the phone at the prison, which we were recording, and actually put them on the phone with Abraham. Abraham gave him the story, basically, hey, you can trust this guy. And he gave him examples. You remember when I first got started, the 5 kilos I brought, the 10 kilos, these are the kilos that went to your informant, the informant, back in the day. He goes, I've worked with this guy for years. He's absolutely trustworthy. He grew up with these people. He can take you straight to them. He can set them up for you. Yeah. And the Columbians believed him. So they called back to New York and basically said they had made contact, and we had a phone number at that point. They gave it to Margarita. And right now they haven't got a place to stay in Memphis, right? They don't have a place.
Right, I remember that.
And they're waiting on other people that are taking care of business in New York. So we took that phone number. It was a New York number, area code. We took that phone number, and that night, after the meeting at Wendy's, we went back to Harry's house based on everything we've talked about, everything we know up to this point. I started front, information-wise, and started writing back on the affidavit for a wiretap. Harry started from the back, which would be Wendy's, the meeting at Wendy's, and started writing backwards. You understand what I'm saying? And we met somewhere in the middle there. We stayed up all night. It was right at daylight. We wrote all night.
So y'all realize how important it was to take this method, this route, or getting the Title III wire intercept. That's what y'all was doing. Of course, when you do that, you really have to explain why it was so important to be able to listen to these phone calls. I'm talking about listen to them. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what you was doing. Yeah.
So we started writing, and look, we got a little time built in. Because they're waiting for the other person to get there, who was the leader, I think. The other two people to get there. So we had a little time. We gave the affidavit to Billy, and I think McGriff proofread it, Brian Chambers proofread it, Billy proofread it.
Yeah.
Got a finished copy over the U.S. Attorney's Office where it stalled. You know who stalled it over there. But basically, we used, and it's the truth, we got to be up on this phone. You got people here that's going to kill U.S. citizens, Memphians. If they find them, they're going to kill them.
All right. Well, we're running out of time for this episode. So we're going to have to continue with this story next week. So please tune in to hear the end of this case of the Columbian hit squad. This is the GlaDEAtor, signing off now. And see you soon for part 2. The GlaDEAtor.